Perry perched herself on a chair by the window and gazed out at a spreading oak tree, its decaying leaves shimmering ruby and gold. She wondered if there was time to visit the ladies, but the dread of returning after the seminar had started kept her rooted to her seat. Outside the day had turned overcast, and even though it was still early in the afternoon, it felt like dusk. Exactly on the hour the door opened and Professor Azza strode in carrying a stack of files, a large box of crayons and what looked like an hourglass. He was wearing a navy corduroy jacket with leather elbow patches. Although his crisp white shirt was immaculately ironed, his tie wasn't done, as if he had been too bored to knot it, and his hair was a ruffled mess. He either had been trudging into a stiff wind or had repeatedly run his fingers through it. Quick as a whip, he dropped everything onto the desk and placed the hourglass on a lectern, instantly turning it over. Particles of sand trickled from the upper bulb into the lower one, like tiny pilgrims on a holy journey. He stood in front of the whiteboard, tall and slender, and said, with a briskness that upended the lethargy in the classroom, "Hello, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Salamun Alaikum. Peace be with you. Namaste. Jai Janendra. Sat Nam. Sat Sri Akal. I utter my greetings in no particular order of preference or precedence. In case you were wondering, aloha," someone called back. Others chipped in with myriad greetings, a jumble of voices and laughter great. Azza said, rubbing his hands together. "I see you're full of brash confidence. Always a promising sign, or a recipe for disaster. We'll see which." Behind his black and tortoiseshell spectacles, his eyes shone like beads off burnished sea glass. His tone surged in waves of enthusiasm, like an explorer back from far-off lands now sharing his adventures among friends. He congratulated everyone for having the curiosity and chutzpah to enroll in the seminar and added, with a wink, that he also expected them to have the stamina to go all the way to the end. From the ease and speed with which he spoke, it was hard, if not impossible, to fathom when he was joking and when he was serious. As you may have already noticed, there are 11 of you, 10 would have been too perfect, and perfection is boring, Azza said. He looked around and clucked his tongue. "I can see we have work to do. You've spread out your chairs as if you're afraid of catching pneumonia. So if it may trouble you, ladies and gentlemen, could you please stand up?" Surprised, amused, the students did as they were told. How obedient. The highest virtue in the eyes of the Lord, they say. Now could you rearrange your chairs to make a circle, that being the most suitable shape for talking about God? Different subjects required different sitting arrangements, as it explained. For politics, scattered and amorphous; for sociology, a neat triangle; for statistics, a rectangle; and for international relations, a parallelogram. But God had to be discussed in a circle, everyone on the circumference equidistant from the center, looking at one another's eyes. From now on, when I walk in each week, I'll expect to find you sitting in a ring. It took them a few minutes, and a bit of chair scraping and shuffling around, to accomplish the task. When they finished, the shape they'd formed resembled more of a squeezed lemon than a proper circle. Professor Azza, though not fully pleased, thanked them for their efforts. Next, he asked them to introduce themselves in a few sentences, mentioning their backgrounds and, in particular, why they were interested in God, when there are surely more entertaining things for young people out there. The first to speak was Mona. She said after the tragedy of 9/11, she was extremely worried about the perception of Islam in the West. Careful with her words, she said she was proud to be a young Muslim woman, loved her faith with all her heart, but was frustrated by the amount of prejudice she had to deal with almost every day. People who don't know anything about Islam make gross generalizations about my religion, my prophet, my faith, she added quickly, and my headscarf. She said she was here to engage in honest discussions about the nature of the Almighty, since they were all created by Him and created differently for a reason. I respect diversity, Booty also expect to be respected in return. The young man beside Mona, when it was his turn to speak, straightened his back and cleared his throat. His name was Ed. Coming from a scientific background, he said he approached God with objective caution and intellectual neutrality. He believed that science and faith could marry, as likely as not, but one had to filter out the irrational parts of religion, of which there were many. My dad is Jewish, my mum is Protestant, both non-observant, he added. I suppose, like Mona, but in a different way, I'm interested in identity and faith in the modern age, although God has never been an issue for me. Frankly, then why are you here? Asked a muscular and slightly pockmarked sandy-haired boy, spinning a pencil between his fingers. I thought everyone in this class had an issue with God. Perry noticed Ed glance up at Professor Eza, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Something passed between them, a message she could not decode. Eza turned to the sandy-haired boy. Normally, I expect and encourage students to comment on each other's words, but not at this early stage. We're baby chicks hatching. Let's first poke our heads out of the egg. The next to speak was Roisin, a pretty girl with a noticeable Irish accent. She had large brown eyes and dark sleek hair, a strand of which momentarily caught on her lip as she began to speak. She said she was raised Catholic and attended Mass every week. She was fortunate to be surrounded by wonderful people at the Oxford Catholic Society, but she wished to broaden her perspective. I thought it'd be interesting to take this seminar, just to see how God is being discussed outside my comfort zone. So, she left the sentence unfinished, as if she trusted others to finish it for her. I guess I'm next, kicked in the sandy-haired boy, spinning the pencil faster now. I'm Kevin, a Rhodes Scholar from Fresno, California. His broad face contorting, Kevin argued that Ernest Hemingway, how I was right about everything, had nailed it when he said all thinking people were atheists. He himself was a devoted atheist for one. I don't believe in any of this bullshit, and that's why I'm here. I want to engage in constructive debates on science, evolution, and what you guys keep calling God. I'm sure I'll soon piss everyone off. Someone sniffed, either with derision or pity. Impossible to tell. Hello, everyone. My name is Avi. I'm a member of the Oxford Chabad Society. I also work part-time at the Samson Judaica Library, which is the largest Judaica library around. Some of you might not know that Oxford has a rich Jewish heritage. Avi argued there was enough hatred in the world to catapult humanity into World War III. The ghost of history haunted the present moment. He said human beings were capable of horrible atrocities, as seen in the Holocaust and in the destruction of the Twin Towers. The need to foster a true dialogue across religions was urgent. Fear of God was the strongest deterrent against the violent streak in Homo sapiens. In the modern age, God was needed more than ever before. Avi seemed willing to say more, but the dark-haired girl next to him interjected, brisk and restless. Her name was Sujata. She talked about the differences between Eastern philosophy and its Western counterpart, or Middle Eastern, I should say, since Abrahamic religions all come from the same region. It takes an outsider to notice how similar they are. Sujata said, as a Brit of Indian origin, her motto in life was, your idea of you creates your reality. In her eyes, God had no attributes. She didn't mean to offend anyone, but she found the Abrahamic God too stern, judgmental, aloof. I say, everything is God. Whereas you say, everything is God's. That little apostrophe makes a huge difference. At once compliant and defiant, Sujata concluded by saying how much she was looking forward to discussing these philosophical disparities at length. With every person that spoke, Perry slid further down in her chair, visibly shrinking herself. She wished she could disappear altogether. She began to have a gnawing suspicion that Professor Eza had cherry-picked the students, not so much on the merits of their academic credentials as on their personal stories and ambitions. No two students came from the same background, and there were obvious differences of opinion among them that could easily escalate into a clash. Perhaps that was what Eza wanted, a conflict, or many. Perhaps he was experimenting on his students without their being aware, as though they were a litter of mice, scurrying and scrapping inside the walls of his mental laboratory. If so, what could he possibly be testing? A new idea of God? There was something else that troubled Perry. If every person around her had been selected so as to assemble a miniature Babel, why had she been chosen? What could Asa know about her when she had told him so little? The more she racked her brain, the more insecure she felt. Dr. Raymond's words echoed in her ears, his teaching method is unorthodox. It doesn't sit well with everyone. It's a seminar that divides students. Some enjoy it, others become profoundly unhappy. Hi, I'm Kimber, said a girl with hair so curly that whenever she moved her head a few ringlets bounced up and down. I have a long answer and a short answer. Start with the long one, said Professor Asa. Kimber explained that her father was a priest in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were Mormons. All her family and friends were Mormons. She said she was interested in the seminar because God gave meaning to her life and she intended to expand her understanding of Him. She added that young people today were solely interested in dating or studying for exams or finding a job with more money than anyone could ever use. But she believed there had to be more to life. We each have a distinct purpose on earth. I'm still searching for mine and the short answer. Asa demanded. Kimber giggled. I made a bet with my friend. She said you're the meanest tutor when it comes to marking essays. I'm a straight A student. Never failed in any class since kindergarten. So I took the challenge. A serene smile crossed Asa's lips. Truth is so rare a thing, it is delightful to tell it. Perry, her mouth half covered by her hand, could not help murmuring to herself, Emily Dickinson. Let's move on. Next, instructed the professor. Adam. Rounded nose, cleft chin, and high eyebrows that made him look as though the world were a constant surprise to him. He said culturally he was an Anglican but not a churchgoer. It was not necessary to go to church, he added, since he believed God was about love and God loved him the way he was. I believe in the universal principle of live, love, learn. All with a capital L. That's all. Is it my turn? Asked the girl beside him. My name is Elizabeth. Born and bred in Oxfordshire, haven't travelled far from home. My family comes from a proud Quaker heritage. I don't have an issue with God, but I do have a problem with He God. Elizabeth explained that human beings had lost touch with nature and the earth as goddess. Throughout history, femininity had been suppressed. The price was paid in wars, bloodshed and violence. She said she was into old religions, shamanism, Wicca, Tibetan Buddhism. Anything that helps us to connect with the Mother Earth. She urged everyone to stop thinking of God as a he, and to start practicing saying she. Now it was only Perry and the boy beside her who were yet to talk. Perry gestured with her hand that he should go first and he gestured for her to go. Instead, she yielded. Okay, my name is Perry, and that quote was from Emily Dickinson. Well done, Asa cut in. Perry knew she was blushing. She had no idea the professor had heard her. I come from Istanbul, and she lost her train of thought and stammered, feeling foolish for mentioning the city she was born in instead of saying something more substantive like the others had. I'm not sure why I'm here. Then quit, said Kevin cheekily. That'll make us 10 again. I want the perfect number. A ripple of laughter spread through the circle. Perry lowered her gaze. How had she managed to stumble over a simple introduction when all the others, despite their apparent differences, had sailed through theirs seamlessly? The last to speak was a boy called Bruno. He said he was not a Marxist or anything, but on the issue of religion being the poison of the people, had agreed with Marx, and the former Albanian leader Enver Hoxha, whose views he had read once and found remarkable in their clarity on the subject of religion. That's fine, young man, Asa said, but when we quote others, particularly philosophers and poets for whom words are important, we must do so with precision. What Marx actually said was, religion is the sigh of depressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. Right. Same thing, Bruno rejoined, barely disguising his irritation at being interrupted on a topic he felt passionate about. His chin jutting out as if preparing for a blow, he said Mona had asked for honest discussions and he was going to be honest to the point of being blunt. He was aware that some people might not like to hear what he had to say, but he believed this was a seminar that valued free debate. He had a problem with Islam. To be fair, he added, he would have an issue with all monotheistic religions, but Christianity and Judaism were reformed, whereas Islam was not. Bruno argued that Islam's treatment of women was unacceptable and had he been born a woman into this faith he would have abandoned it at the speed of light. He said that Islam would have to be thoroughly altered to be suitable for today's world, but under the circumstances that was inconceivable, because both the Holy Book and the Hadiths were seen as absolute, unequivocal. If change is forbidden, how can we improve this religion? From her corner Mona gave him an icy look and a piece of her mind who says I need you to improve my religion. Brilliant, everyone, great start, interjected Asa. Thank you for sharing your thoughts so eloquently. After listening to you harangue each other about religion, instead of God, which is our main subject, I need to explain in no uncertain terms, what this seminar will be about. Walking in a circle inside the ring of students, the professor moved with assurance and spoke with ardor. We're not here to confer about Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism. We might touch upon these traditions but only insofar as our central topic requires it. Ours is a scientific inquiry into the nature of God. You can't let your personal beliefs get in the way. When you become emotional about a subject, any subject, just remember, as Russell noted, the degree of one's emotions varies inversely with one's knowledge of the facts. The light in the room faded as the sun passed behind a large cloud. As his eyes glinted. Are we all clear on that? Yes, the students answered in an effervescent chorus. Then, a few seconds later, softly, no, it was Perry. Asa stopped. What was that you said? Sorry, it's... I just don't think there's anything wrong about responding to emotions. Perry gesticulated with both hands. We're human beings. That means we are driven more by emotions than by reason. So why belittle emotions? She glanced up at the professor, dreading the expression she might find on his face. He was calm, supportive, even slightly impressed by her objection. That's good, Istanbul girl, keep challenging. Asa said that if, at the end of their years at Oxford, they still spoke, thought, and wrote in the same way as they did when they had started university, they would have wasted their time and their family's money. They might as well go back home now. Be prepared to change, all of you. Only stone boulders do not change, actually, they do too. Here they were, at the oldest university in the English-speaking world. Asa said. Oxford had not only been a center for academic study and scientific research throughout centuries, but also a hub of theological debate and religious dispute. You're lucky. You're in the right place to talk God. As Professor Asa kept lecturing, his entire demeanor changed. His face, hitherto settled, now became distinctly animated. His tone, no longer careful and contained, had an edge, a blade of steel that he normally kept in the shadows, but that he now made no attempt to conceal. He reminded Perry of a street cat in Istanbul, not the timid and bruised kind that gave humans awed birth, but one of those independent felines that crept along the highest off walls, full of strutting aplomb, surveying the neighborhood as if it were its secret kingdom. All right, here's a question. If someone from the Bronze Age appeared and asked you to describe God, what would you say? He's merciful, Mona said. Self-sufficient, Avi added. Not he, but she, said Elizabeth. Neither he nor she, said Kevin. It's all lies. Professor Asa frowned. Bravo, you stupendously failed the test. Why's that? Bruno objected. Because you do not share the same language, remember, you and your hairy ancestor. He produced a stack of papers and a box of crayons, which asked Roizen to hand out. Forget words. Explain through images. What? Bruno exclaimed. You want us to draw? Are we little kids? I wish you were, Asa said. You'd have a greater imagination and a better grasp of complexity. Mona put up her hand. Sir, Islam forbids idols. We don't depict God. We believe he is beyond our perception. Fair enough. Draw what you just told me. For the next 10 minutes they shifted and shuffled, sighed and complained, but, by and by, began producing an array of work. A picture of the universe, stars and galaxies and meteors. A cluster of white clouds pierced by a bolt of lightning. An image of Jesus Christ with his arms wide open. A mosque with golden domes under the sun. Lord Ganesha with his elephant head. A goddess with plump breasts. A candle in the dark. A page deliberately left blank. Everyone visualized God in their own way. As for Perry, after a brief hesitation, she made a dot, which she then turned into a question mark. Time's up, said Professor Eza. He distributed another batch of paper. Having sketched what God is, I'd like you to illustrate what God is not. What? Eza arched his eyebrows. Stop reacting, Bruno, and get to work. A demon with snake yellow eyes. An iron mask of horror. A fetid swamp. A smoking gun. A knife caked in blood. Fire. Destruction. A fragment from hell. Oddly, imagining what God was not proved harder than imagining what he was. Only Elizabeth seemed to find the task easy. She simply drew a man. Thank you for your cooperation, said Professor Eza. Could you lift 2 drawings and hold them side by side? Show them to everyone in the circle. This they did, inspecting one another's works. Now turn the images towards yourselves. Okay. Great. We're about to examine a question raised by philosophers, scholars, and mystics throughout history. What is the relationship between the 2 pictures? This time Bruno was not alone. Does the first drawing, of what God is, embody or exclude the second drawing, of what God is not? Eza started pacing. For instance, if God is omnipotent and omnipresent, all-powerful and all-benevolent, does that mean that he, or she, embodies evil too, or does it mean that evil is external to him, or her, an outside force that he/she needs to fight? What exactly is the relation between what God is and what God is not? Eza continued. You have drawn 2 pictures. Tell me how they are connected. Write an essay. It can be in any style so long as it is brave, bold, honest, and supported by academic research. No one said a word. When they were sketching, they had taken the exercise lightly, not much believing in it. Had they known they would be asked to write an essay on the connection between the 2 images, they would have been more thoughtful. But it was too late. Go back to philosophers, mystics, scholars of the past. Stay away from today. Stay away from your own mind. Stay away from our own mind. Kevin repeated this. Then, is your assignment for next week. Do your best, impress me. Eza announced as he grabbed his files, the crayons, the hourglass, in which the last grain of sand had just slid into the bulb below. But I warn you, I'm not easy to impress. The Psychic Istanbul, 2016. Aromas of coffee, cognac, and cigars blending uneasily with the expensive perfumes in the air hit Perry as soon as she came back into the room. She was still thinking about the message she had left on Shirin's answering machine when she noticed the psychic a few feet away. With a complacent smile spreading across his features, the man sat on a chaise longue, surrounded by kneeling and fawning women, like a sultan in a grotesque Orientalist fantasy. The American hedge fund manager was also there, waiting patiently for his coffee cup to be read. Perry walked towards the men's circle, oblivious to the rules of social conduct. She sat herself down in the middle of the group, beside her wristband, under clouds of blue-gray smoke from multiple cigars. Adnan placed his hand on her shoulder and squeezed gently. Once, twice. A code between them signifying, "Are you bored?" She took his hand, squeezed back, only once. "I'm fine, mark my words, the Middle Eastern map will be redrawn," the architect was saying to those around him. "It's clear the Western powers have a major plan, that's for sure. They'll never allow us Muslims to prosper," concurred the Islamist newspaper tycoon. "The Crusades have never ended." "Yes, but Turkey is not the same Turkey," said the nationalist architect. We are no meek lamb. Not the sick man of Europe anymore. Europe's no scared of us, and will do anything to stir up unrest, the tycoon agreed. They certainly know how to foment chaos. An invisible hand pushes a button and it all flares up again, bloodshed and violence. We must be on the alert. The rest of the men were listening intently, some nodding, others quiet. Through the cigar smoke Perry looked at them. To me what you're saying sounds like sheer paranoia, she said softly. Europeans. Westerners, Russians. Arabs. If you were to get to know them, not as a category but individually, then you would see how we are all, more or less, flesh and mind, the same. She paused. We can only recognize ourselves in the face of the other. The architect and the tycoon gaped at her in astonishment. Adnan gave her a wink. Well said, darling. Smiling at her husband, Perry excused herself and stood up. She crossed to the opposite side of the room and approached the women's circle. Seeing her, the PR woman leaned over and whispered something into the psychic's ear. The man listened, his eyebrows raised. He looked up and stared at Perry. He smiled. She didn't. His smile grew wider. Like all those accustomed to being flattered and fawned upon, he was most intrigued by the one person who tried to avoid him. Why doesn't your guest join us? The psychic asked the hostess, how sitting across from him with Pom-Pom nestled on her lap. Adamant, the businesswoman jumped to her feet. One hand under Pom-Pom's belly, she cupped the other around Perry's elbow, gently but firmly steering her towards the guest of honor. Did you meet our friend Perry? She said to the psychic. She was late just like you. She had an accident on the way here. Sounds like you had a tough day, the man said, eyeing Perry's bandaged hand and damaged dress. Nothing important, Perry said. You deserve a gift. Would you like me to read your future? He rose to his feet and added with a smile. For free. The girlfriend of the journalist and the PR woman sitting on either side of him, waiting for their turns, were not pleased. Perry shook her head. You have enough to do. Don't worry, I'm here for everyone. A slow smile crept over his face, as if he had intended to say something else but decided to keep it to himself. I think I'll skip it this time, he chuckled, though his eyes had acquired a steely gleam. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've yet to meet a woman who doesn't want to know her future. The PR woman saw an opportunity. How about her past? But no. It's just not her thing, the man said, holding his gaze on Perry and offering his hand to her. It was nice to meet you, though. Perry extended her left hand, almost reflexively. Instead of shaking it, he grabbed her wrist, not letting go. Something passed from him to her, a tingling sensation, a flash of warmth. Still holding her hand, he said, distrust charlatans, but not a real psychic. Oh, he's the best, nothing like the others, confirmed the businesswoman. Maybe another day, said Perry, pulling back. No sooner had she taken a step than the psychic's voice caught up with her. You miss someone? Perry glanced over her shoulder at him. What did you say? He came closer. Someone you loved. You lost him. Perry quickly composed herself. You could say the same thing to half the women, and men, in the world. He laughed, a false brightness in his voice. This is different. Involuntarily, she folded her arms over her chest, determined not to have any further contact. I can see the first letter of his name, he said with a confidential tone that was still loud enough for all the women to hear. It's an A. Most male names start with A, Perry said without thinking. My husband's, for instance. You know what, I won't embarrass you in front of everyone. I'll put it in a napkin. Kazim, yelled the businesswoman in a twitter. Bring us a pen, hurry up. The PR woman said mischievously, if it's an old story, why not share it? Who said it was old, added the psychic. It's alive, breathing. Perry managed to remain calm while a tempest brewed inside. She just wanted him to leave her alone. Not only him, but all these women and all these men, and this city with its endless chaos. The waitress appeared with the requested item, so fast it was almost as if she had been waiting for this moment. The psychic made a show of writing so the others couldn't see, folding the napkin, each move painfully slow and ceremonious. "It's my gift for you," he said as he gave it to Perry. "Right, thanks." She walked away from the women, passed by the men, stepped out onto the terrace. The fishing boat was gone, the water stretched out ahead, darker than the deepest regrets. A car tore down the street with its engine roaring and loud music, a romantic song in English, blasting from its open windows. Perry squinted her eyes, trying to imagine the man, always a man who would play such music at these decibels and at this hour. Gingerly, she unclenched her left fist, the hand she used for writing, the hand that was her strongest. There, on the surface of a crumpled napkin, Thepsi Sheik had drawn 3 female figures, like the 3 wise monkeys. The 3 of them. Under the first one was written, "She saw evil." Under the second, "She heard evil." And under the third were these words, "She did evil." Part 4. The Seat, Oxford, 2001. On New Year's Eve, Perry was too excited to do even half the things she wanted to do. In the morning she went out running, but could not keep up her rhythm, and the cramp in her calf was so bad that she had to finish early. When she sat down at her desk to read, she found herself unable to concentrate, the words crawling like hungry ants across the white paper. She felt just as famished. With a tendency to episodes of comfort eating, she feared that in her agitated state, if she had one bite, she might not be able to stop. So she nibbled apples instead. And she listened to the radio. That helped, the steady sound soothing her nerves. She tuned into the world news, the local news, political debates, and a BBC documentary on the Aztec Empire. But a documentary, even one on the mighty Aztecs, could only last so long. No matter how hard she tried to put the evening out of her mind, it loomed large in her thoughts. In the end it came as a relief when it was time to get ready. No dinner with Professor Asa could be worse than its anticipation. Perry applied mascara, black eyeliner and lip gloss, and left it at that. She examined her face in the mirror, finding the nose she had inherited from her mother too plump. If there was a way, with the right cosmetics, to make it look thinner, she hadn't a clue. Had Shireen been here, Perry might have asked her advice. Then again, had Shireen been here, Perry would probably not be going to Asa's. "You should not be alone on New Year's Eve," the professor had said. He hadn't invited her out of pity, she hoped. What to wear was a challenge. Not that she was lost for choice. But with few pieces she had, she put together multiple combinations, all of which she tried on, one by one. The denim black skirt with the loose blouse, the blouse with the jeans with the green jacket. She didn't want to look like a student, or, worse, to look as if she didn't want to look like a student. At last, with a pile of clothes on the bed, she settled on a velvet skirt and a cerulean blue jumper, its softness giving the impression of cashmere. She finished the outfit with a deep blue necklace of evil eye beads. Though he had been clear about not bringing anything, she had learned from her mother never to go anywhere empty-handed. She bought 8 small tarts from a delicatessen in Little Clarendon Street, which was silly of her as they cost more than a whole cake. She walked to the bus stop and waited. In less than 5 minutes the bus arrived. She stood and watched as the bus doors opened and closed again. Then she watched the bus depart without her as she walked back to her place to change the skirt and the jumper. A long black dress and heavy boots. Better. Asa lived just outside town, up the Woodstock Road, about 20-minute Hesby bus, in the village of Godstow. In spring it would be enfolded in the lush greenery of the English countryside, with clean views across Port Meadow to the dreaming spires of Oxford, though now darkness had fallen. By the time she got off the bus, it had begun to snow again, big fluffy flakes on her hair, on her coat. There were no other houses within direct sight, which didn't surprise Perry. She had more than once suspected her tutor of being a secret misanthrope. It was an imposing stone-clad, double-fronted house, though it was hard to tell its age, not unlike its owner. It looked like a place with a past, a house with stories. She walked towards it slowly, careful not to slip, on a winding path with leafless oaks on both sides. The wind cut through her coat. She shivered, as much from nerves as from the cold. She glanced back at the bus stop, as though worried that it might not still be there later that night. How would she get home? There had to be people at the party who lived in Oxford, and one of them was bound to be able to give her a lift. It was typical of her to get overwrought about the end of an evening before it had even started. Lights spilled from the ground floor windows, warm and golden like honey. Clutching the box of pastries against her chest, Perry stood by the door, listening to the noise coming from inside, merry chatter, peals off laughter and, in the background, waves of music. The kind of music that none of her friends listened to, nor did she. The music, just like the light, was at once inviting and intimidating. As Perry took a step forward, she heard a hiss, like the swish of a distant car. But there was nothing on the road. No bus, no motorcycle, and surely no bikes in this weather. In the meantime, a different part of her brain, slower and wiser, warned her that the sound was much closer. She peered around. Her gaze fell on the high hedge to her right. She froze, her heart accelerating. Nothing moved, not even the wind, and yet she was no certain that something or someone was watching her. Instinctively she called out, "Who's there?" In the murky blackness, Perry thought she spotted a silhouette flitting behind the bushes. She took a step forward. "Troy? Is that you?" The boy emerged, looking pale and embarrassed. "My God, you scared me," Perry said. "Are you following me?" "Not you, silly," Troy said, and nodded towards the house. "It's the devil I am after." He paused. "What are you doing here?" Perry refused to answer. "You're spying on the professor." "Told you, I'm suing him." "Need evidence in court. You are obsessed with him," Perry thought. Strange it was that among the many kinds of obsession, hatred and love were only shades apart, like adjacent hues on an artist's palette. A wave of laughter rose from the house. Troy darted back behind the hedgerow. "Please don't tell them I'm here," Perry frowned. "You have no right to do this." "I'll go in and wait for 10 minutes. Then I'll come out and check. If you haven't left by then, I'm telling Asa. If he doesn't call the police, I will." "Wow, calm down," said Troy, hands in the air. "Don't shoot." She left him and turned towards the front door, which had a panel of stained glass, amber, olive, and crimson. She quickly rang the bell. A bird-like tone pierced the air. Not a sweet canary or a nightingale, but more like a squawking parrot, laughing at the hapless visitor. The sounds from inside ceased for a moment and just as quickly resumed. On the other side of the colored glass a shadow appeared. She could hear approaching footsteps. She had not renewed her lip gloss, but it was too late. The door opened. A woman stood blocking the entrance. A tall blonde, toned, lithe and good-looking. She examined Perry up and down, her mouth fixed in a smile that could have been friendly were it not for its imperiousness. She knew she was sexy. The midnight blue strapless dress that clung to her body revealed an hourglass figure. Definitely not a professor, thought Perry. She was glad she had changed her jumper. She wanted nothing in common with this woman. Not even a shade of blue. Asa had said that his dog, Spinoza, was his family now, but that didn't mean he didn't have a girlfriend. Or even a wife. He didn't wear a wedding ring, but not every husband felt bound to display one. Why had it not occurred to her that he had someone in his life? Of course he did. At his age everyone did. "Hello there, pretty young face," said the woman, as she grabbed the box from Perry's hand. "You must be the Turkish girl." Just then, to the sound of hasty footsteps, Asa appeared, holding an unopened bottle of wine directed towards them like a miniature ship's cannon. He wore a gunmetal gray turtleneck sweater and a burgundy wool and cashmere jacket. "Perry, you came," the professor exclaimed, his forehead glistening in thelite. "Don't stand there in the cold. Come in, come in." She followed them, into the drawing room. Along the corridor the walls were covered in framed photographs. Portraits of people from different parts of the world stared at her, aloof and self-absorbed, as though they already knew something she was yet to discover. Fascinating photographs. Who took them? Asked Perry. Asa answered with a wink. I did. Oh, really? You must have traveled a lot. Just a bit. You know, I've been to Turkey, to Istanbul. He shook his head. Not Istanbul, where everybody went or felt like they had to someday. No, Asa had been to other places: Mount Nemrut, with its giant statues of ancient deities, the Byzantine monastery of Sumila nestled upon a steep cliff, and Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark had come to rest. Perry swallowed, worried that he might ask her about these sites, none of which she had visited. In the living room, there were full-height bookcases lining two opposite walls. Between them stood an elegant group of people, chatting heartily. Holding champagne flutes and wine glasses. Turning towards the assembled guests, Asa called out to a young man, Darren, come over here. I want you to meet one of my best students, and as soon as he saw him coming, he disappeared. Darren turned out to be a graduate student in physics. He brought a glass of champagne to Perry, his manners polite and polished. He complimented her on her exotic accent, an accolade it seemed she had earned. He asked her about her background, but was more eager to talk about himself, speaking as if he were racing against the clock. Yes, he was intelligent, ambitious, and desperate for affection. He tried to make her laugh, cracking jokes, one after another, having probably read somewhere that women fell for men with a great sense of humor. He rolled his eyes each time, as if even he didn't find his delivery funny. Nice guy, though. The kind of man who would love and respect his girlfriend, not compete with her, Perry thought. But she knew there would never be more than a flitting spark between them. Why did it have to be this way? Why did she not feel attracted to this boy, who was kind and personable, close to her in age and probably good for her? Instead, it was the professor for whom she secretly yearned, a man not only old, unknown, and unavailable, but also wrong. It puzzled her endlessly that she was not, and had never really been, interested in happiness, that magic word that was the subject of so many books, workshops, and TV shows. She did not want to be unhappy. Of course, she didn't. It just did not occur to her to seek happiness as a worthwhile goal in life. How otherwise could she allow herself to carry a torch for a man like Asa? She breathed in. A boldness she never thought would come her way began to engulf her, like a heady perfume. Could other people, too, sense she was changing inside? Beyond all the gracious words and forced smiles of social life was a frontier that separated responsible individuals from misfits seeking confrontation and buccaneers seeking adventures. A borderline as thin as a whisper, which kept modest Turkish girls away from all kinds of trouble and sin. What would it be like to inch close to that divide, drawing so close as to feel the end of the hard earth under her feet and the beginning of the void beyond, and, suddenly, letting herself fall light and listless? Though she was neither brave nor eccentric, a seed of unorthodoxy had been sown in her heart somewhere along the journey of her youth, germinating unnoticed, waiting to burst through the topsoil. Nasparin Albantoglu, always proper and careful and balanced, yearned to transgress, yearned to ere dinner time, said Asa, with an enticing grin from across the room, brandishing a large serving fork as if it were a spear intended for an unsuspecting guest. There was also a snug alcove by the window. She placed a chair there, declaring it the reading corner. At supper time she knocked on Mona's door, which was opposite hers. The two of them went downstairs to the kitchen, eager to prepare their first meal together. They were surprised to find Shireen already at the table, arranging a bottle of wine, a carton of apple juice, a plate of olives and 3 glasses. We must celebrate, Shireen said. 3 young Muslim women in Oxford. The sinner, the believer, and the confused. There was a brief silence while Mona and Perry worked out which epithet was meant for whom. Perry took her wine glass and raised it in the air. To our friendship. To our collective existential crisis, said Shireen. Speak for yourself, said Mona, sipping her apple juice. Well, you're in denial, said Shireen. Right now we Muslims are going through an identity crisis. Especially the women. And women like us even more so. Meaning, those who are exposed to more than one culture. We're asking big questions. Eat your heart out, Jean-Paul Sartre. Get a load of this. We have an existential crisis like you've never seen. I don't like this kind of talk, said Mona as she took a seat. What makes you think we're so different from others? You speak as if we're from another planet. Shireen took a rapid gulp of her wine. Hello, wake up, sister. There are crutches out there doing really sick stuff in the name of religion, our religion. Maybe not mine, but definitely yours. Doesn't that bother you? What's that got to do with me? Mona said, sticking her chin out. Do you ask every Christian you meet to apologize for the horrors of the Inquisition? If we were living in the Middle Ages, then yes, I might well have done. Oh, so today's Christians and Jews are all wingless angels. Mona said, have you ever been through a checkpoint in Gaza? I don't think you have. What about the genocide in Rwanda? Srebrenica? You don't hold all the Christians in the world responsible for those horrific killings, and you certainly should not. But why, then, blame all Muslims for the actions of a bunch of maniacs? Can you two please stop fighting? Perry said in between coughs. She felt a fever coming on. Shireen persisted. Sure, there are plenty of freaks among Christians and Jews as well, and we have to condemn every sort of bigotry, no matter where it comes from. But you can't deny that right now, there is more fanaticism in the Middle East than anywhere else. Can you walk around alone in Egypt without being sexually assaulted? Forget about streets after dark. I personally know women who were harassed on their way to pilgrimage. In sacred places. In plain daylight. In front of the Saudi police, women keep quiet about these things because they're embarrassed. And why are we embarrassed and not the molesters? There's a hell of a lot, Wayne, to question. I am questioning, Mona said. I question history. Politics. Global poverty. Capitalism. Income gap. Brain drain. War industry. Don't forget the appalling legacy of colonialism. Centuries of plunder and exploitation. That's why the West is so rich. Let's leave Islam in peace and start talking about hardcore issues. Typical, Shireen said, throwing her hands up in despair. Blaming others for our problems. Shall we have dinner? Perry attempted one more time, not that she expected a response. It was a situation she knew only too well, like living with her parents all over again. Angry accusations flying back and forth, a ping-pong of misunderstandings. Even so, she found it easier to be a witness this time. The tension in the air did not affect her the way it did back home. Shireen and Mona were not her mother and her father at each other's throats. She felt no need to mediate. Without any emotional responsibility to weigh her down, her mind was free to analyze. So Shelley stand, secretly envying them. Despite their glaring polarity, they were equally passionate. Mona had her faith, Shireen had her fury. What did she have to hold on to? All I'm saying is, carried on Shireen, the challenges a young Muslim faces today are deeper than the challenges facing a Buddhist monk or a Mormon minister. Let's accept that. I am not accepting anything, said Mona. So long as you're biased against your own religion, we can't have a proper conversation. Here we go again, said Shireen, her voice rising. The moment I open my mouth and speak my mind, you're offended. Can somebody tell me why? Young Muslims are so easily offended. Maybe because we're under attack, said Mona. Every day I have to defend myself when I've done nothing wrong. I'm expected to prove that I am not a potential suicide bomber. I feel under scrutiny all the time. Do you know how lonely that is? As though in response, the rain clouds that had been accumulating all day long broke over the town, pelting against the window. Perry thought about the River Thames nearby, swelling, trying to break free from its course. You Lonely. Give me a break, said Shireen. You have millions standing with you. Governments. Conventional religion. Mainstream media. Popular culture. You also assume you have God on your side, which must be so mething. How much more company can you want? You know who are the real loners in our region? Atheists. Yazidis. Gays. Drag queens. Environmentalists. Conscientious objectors. Those are the outcasts. Unless you fall into one of these categories, don't complain about loneliness. You know nothing, said Mona. I've been bullied, called names, pushed off a bus, treated as if I were dumb, all because of my headscarf. You've no idea how horribly I've been treated. It's just a small piece of cloth, then why do you wear it? It's my choice, my identity. I'm not bothered by your ways, why are you bothered by mine? Who is the liberal here, think? Bloody ignorant, said Shireen. First, it's just one, then it's 10, then millions. Before you know it, it's a republic of headscarves. That's why my parents left Iran. Your small piece of cloth sent us into exile. With every word uttered, Perry's expression hardened. She stared down at the wooden table, chipped at one corner. She had always been drawn to Oscars and the imperfections beneath a smooth surface. What do you think, Perry? Shireen suddenly asked. Yes, tell us, which one of us is right? Mona said. Perry fidgeted under their gaze. She glanced from one expectant face to the other, fumbling for words. In some respects Shireen was right, she said. In other respects, Mona. For instance, she agreed that life could be systematically unfair for a member of a minority, be it cultural or religious or sexual, in a closed Muslim culture, though she was also aware of the hardships facing a headscarved woman in a Western society. For her, it always depended on the context. Whoever was the disempowered, the disadvantaged side in a given place and time, she wanted to support them. Hence she was not categorically for anyone, save the weaker party. That's too abstract, said Shireen, drumming her fingers impatiently on the table. Judging by Mona's expression, for once they seemed to agree. Perry's answer, balanced though it was, had satisfied no one. Let me make one thing clear, Mona said, once again turning to Shireen. I don't have anything against atheists. Or gays. Or drag queens. It's their life. But I do mind Islamophobes. If you're going to sound like a warmongering neocon, I'd better move out of this house. Me, a neocon. Shireen put down her glass with such force that wine slopped onto the table. You want to leave? Fine. But that'd be taking the easy way out. We must try to latch onto what the other is saying. Latch onto. I must remember this phrase, Perry thought to herself. I agree, said Mona. Great, said Shireen. We'll write a Muslim Women's Manifesto. It'd make a lovely logo, MWM. We'll put everything that frustrates us into it. Fanaticism. Sexism. Islamophobia, said Mona. I really think we should start preparing supper now, said Perry. They all laughed. For a moment it was almost as though the storm had passed. It felt calm. Outside the rain had eased up, the early evening seeped into nightfall, the moon was a pearl-scent talisman in the bosom of the sky. Across Port Meadow the Thames ran strong in deep swirling eddies, winding its silvery way through the darkness. You know what, said Mona with a resigned sigh, as if she were revealing something it had taken her a while to understand. You were born into a remarkable religion, you were given a wonderful prophet as your guide, but, instead of counting your blessings and trying to be a better human being, all you do is complain. Shireen said, speaking of the prophet, there are things I find don't even think about it, Mona interjected, her voice quivering for the first time. You can have a go at me. That's all right. But I can't have people rail against my prophet when they know next to nothing about him. Criticize the Muslim world, okay, but leave him out of it. Shireen huffed with frustration. Why should we spare anyone from critical thinking? Especially when we're at university. Because what you call critical thinking is self-serving nonsense, said Mona. Because I know what you're going to say and I also know your gaze is impure, your knowledge tainted. You can't judge the 7th century through the lens of the 21st. Yes, I can, if the 7th century is trying to rule over the 21st. I wish you could be proud of who you are, said Mona. You know what you are, a self-hating Muslim. Ouch, Shireen said in mock pain. I've never understood people who are proud to be American, Arab, or Russian. Christian, Jewish or Muslim. Why should I feel satisfaction with something I had no role in choosing? It's like saying I'm proud of being 5'9". Or congratulating Michelle on my hooked nose. Genetic lottery. But you are quite pleased with your atheism, said Mona. Well, I used to be a militant atheist. I'm no more, thanks to Professor Azza, Shireen said with a theatrical flair. But I really worked hard for my skepticism. I put my mind and heart and courage into it. I separated myself from crowds and congregations. I didn't find it dropped into my lap. Yeah, I'm proud of my journey. So it's true, you despise your culture. You despise me. For you, I'm either backward or brainwashed. Oppressed. Ignorant. But I've studied the Quran, unlike you. I thought it was profoundly eloquent, wise, poetic. I've studied the Prophet's life. The more I read about him, the more I admired his personality. I find peace in my faith. Do you care? I don't even know why I agreed to move in with you. Next, Mona was stomping upstairs to her room. The floorboards protested under the weight of her emotions. Shireen raised her empty glass and flung it with all her might against Thule. Tiny fragments rained on the floor, like sad confetti. Perry flinched but instantly rose to her feet to go and clean. Don't move, Shireen said to Perry. It's my mess. I'll get it. Okay, Perry said. She knew Shireen would pick up only the bigger pieces, but the splinters would stay, stuck between floorboards, waiting to cut them someday. I'm going to my room. Shireen let out a sigh. Good night, Mouse. Perry took a few steps, but then lingered, her eyes fixed on Shireen, whose face had suddenly lost its bravado. He warned me it wouldn't be easy, Shireen muttered to herself when she thought she was alone. Who warned you? Perry asked. Shireen lifted her head, her eyelids fluttering in disarray. Nothing, she said. There was an edge to her tone that hadn't been there before. Look, we'll talk later, okay? I need a bath now. It's been a long day. Unable to sleep, alone in the kitchen, Perry poured herself another glass of wine, her mind whirling. Had she accidentally stumbled on a secret? Shireen's inadvertent remark niggled at her. Whether by intuition or by reason, she suspected that behind Shireen's eagerness to move in together there was a master manipulator. She recalled a passage in one of his earlier books where he explored the peculiar idea that people in bitter disagreement and mutual recrimination should be left alone together in a closed space and made to look each other in the eye. A white supremacist prisoner should be put in the same cell with a black prisoner, a jade miner in a room with an environmentalist, a trophy hunter with an endangered animal conservationist. At the time she had read those lines, she had not given them much thought, but now it all fell into place. She was inside a game, unwittingly playing her part, controlled by some faraway brain. In dismay, she slipped upstairs. Mona's bedroom door was closed. From the bathroom at the end of the corridor came the sound of running water. Inside, Shireen was humming a tune that sounded faintly familiar, the melody almost haunting. Perry tiptoed into Shireen's bedroom. There were cardboard boxes everywhere. Clearly Shireen hadn't done much to unpack. On one of the larger cartons was written in capital letters, "Books." It was open and Perry could see some of the volumes had been placed on the shelf. By the look of things, Shireen had tired of the chore, leaving the rest of the box untouched. Perry rummaged through the contents. It didn't take her long to find what she was looking for. Title by title, she fished out all of Professor Az's backlist. Grabbing the first one, she turned to the title page. It was signed just as she had expected. To sweet Shireen, perpetual émigrée, fearless mutineer, philosophical outcast, the girl who knows how to ask questions and is not afraid of pursuing the answers, as a Perry snapped the book shut with a pang of jealousy. Not that she didn't know Shireen visited the professor regularly, at least twice a week, and that two of them were close, but it tortured her to see Shireen's value in Hises. She checked the other titles only to find out that they, too, were inscribed. The last one she grabbed, as his latest publication, had a longer inscription. To Shireen, who is unlike her name, sweet and sharp, like the pomegranates of Persia, the land of the lion and the sun, but must come to know, if not to love, what she regards with contempt, for only in the mirror of the other can one glimpse the face of God. Love, my dear, love thy stepsister, as a what stepsister? Perry knew Shireen did not have one, unless it was a metaphor for the other woman. Perry took a breath as the enormity of the setup dawned on her. Shireen despised religion and religious people. While she laid into all denominations, it was the faith she was brought up in that she criticized most. She was particularly allergic to young Muslim women who covered their heads out of personal choice. The mullahs and the morality police silence us on the outside. But those girls who sincerely believe they must cover themselves so as not to seduce men, they silence us from inside, she had once said. The more Perry mulled it over, the more convinced she was that Professor Asa had placed Shireen in a social laboratory as a way of forcing her to interact with her other, Mona. Shaken though she was by the discovery, there was something that troubled Perry even more. Maybe it wasn't just Mona. She swallowed hard, seeing herself, for the first time, through Shireen's eyes. Her lack of certainty, her hesitancy, her timidity, her passivity. Qualities someone like Shireen would abhor. 3 Muslim women in Oxford, the sinner, the believer and the confused. It wasn't only Mona who had been selected for this bizarre social experiment. She now understood, the second stepsister was Perry herself. She put back the book, closed the box, left the room. How she regretted leaving the peace and quiet of her college room and ending up in this house where their every move would be reported to Professor Asa. She felt like a flea inside a glass jar, warm and safe at first glance, trapped nonetheless.